Hey everybody, this is Mr. Storm, and today we are going to talk about the second semester of this class, the second half of the Computer Programming 1 course. In the first semester, we learned what variables were, we learned conditionals, we learned how to create loops, we learned about switches and classes and methods and all that fun stuff, and that's great. But the programs we were making weren't that cool. They were kind of boring, right? They're console programs, so they're not that exciting. In this semester, we're going to take all that stuff you learned in the first semester and we're going to apply it to making some really cool video games. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to use a piece of software called Unity. Many of you have probably heard of Unity, and if you take my game development courses, then you've definitely used Unity in the past. This video, I'm just going to show you what Unity looks like and how it works and how we can use it to make some cool video games. So I'm going to open up this Pac-Man game that I'm working on. It's, whatever. It's a work in progress. It's not completely finished, but this will give you an idea of what Unity can do. So while that's opening, the scope of this course, the idea for the second half of this course is I want you to take those skills that you've learned and apply them to game development. And the reason why is because app development and game development are really the two big avenues for software developers, especially if you're developing things on your own. If you're working for a big company, you could be doing some web development or things like that. But if you're on your own, you're probably programming to make video games. You're probably programming to make applications. And so this is a use of the skills that you've learned. This is basically just showing you how to use the skills you've learned so far, right? Okay, easy. So this is Unity. Now this interface maybe looks a little bit complicated, but it's okay. I'm going to go through and explain what all this stuff means. Now the one thing I want you to understand is in the first of all, we're only going to be focused on 2D games in this class. If you want to learn how to do 3D game development, then you're going to want to take my Game Development 1 and 2 class. The Game Development 2 class focuses on 3D game development. We're going to be mainly focused on 2D game development because we don't need to get too fancy. We just want to make some cool games. So every time you create a new project or open a project in Unity for this class, it's going to be a 2D project. So let's talk about these panels here so we can get this out of the way and you can become familiar with the interface. So right here in the middle, we have our scene view. And this scene view is basically just what the game is. This is just where you put the art objects and other objects that are going to exist in your game. Now, when you work on a project in this class, you are not going to have to worry about putting in the sprites and all the characters and managing all of their peripherals and everything like that. You don't have to worry about that. I'm going to give you a fully built project, something kind of like this. You'll open it up and you'll see what it looks like, and then you'll be able to write the scripts for it. This game is only concerned with writing scripts, and we'll get to that in a minute. So that's the scene view. This is where you're going to see what's in your game. There's also game view, where you can see what the game will look like whenever you actually run it. And actually, we can run the game here and see what it looks like. So I'm going to run the game, and looks like I can move. Oh, and I got eaten. Let's run it again. I think Blinky's a little bit too fast. So I can run the game, and I can move around as Pac-Man and gobble up the dots. Now notice Blinky's only going in a circle there because I haven't programmed in more routes for him to take. But that's okay. You guys get the idea. So this is made basically just using some sprites, some animations, and more importantly, some scripts. So that is your game view and the scene view. Over here on this side, we have the hierarchy. The hierarchy is where all the objects that exist in your game live. So the dots are all here. Pac-Man is right there. The maze itself is right there. The main camera, so that we can see what we're looking at in the game, is right there. We have some waypoints for Blinky to follow. All that stuff, those are all objects that exist in the game. So they live here in the hierarchy. And notice that they live underneath this one main header called main. There's the Unity icon next to it, and it says main. That is the scene that we're in. So we're in a scene called main. All right, perfect. Now, down here on the bottom, we have the project panel. And the project panel has a couple folders in it. Right here we have the assets folder. And inside the assets folder, we have a couple of other things. We have an animations folder, a scenes folder, a scripts folder, and a sprites folder. And these folders are just built by me just to organize my game assets. So for example, if I go into the sprites folder, I can see I have some sprite sheets for the dots and the PacMan and Blinky and all that stuff. Those sprite sheets live in the sprites folder. The scenes, I only have one scene. That's the main scene that we're using here. But if I wanted to make more levels for the game, then I would have more than one scene. I also have animations. I have some PacMan animations and some Blinky animations. But again, the animations you're not going to have to worry about because any animations that exist are already going to be built by me. Same thing with sprites. You're not going to be making custom sprites in this class unless you want to. All the sprites are going to be built by me. Scripts is where it gets interesting. So down here I have 3 different scripts that I've written for this game, right? And so I have the dot script, ghost move script, and PacMan move script, right? So these scripts actually make the game work. If these scripts didn't exist, then the game wouldn't do anything. I'd hit play and the objects on the screen would just sit there static. They wouldn't do anything. So I want scripts to be able to make games work. That's just how game development is, right? And you are going to be learning in this class how to write scripts for these games. But first we need to learn how to implement scripts in our game. Let's take a look at our PacMan real quick. There he is. Handsome yellow dot thing here. If we have our PacMan selected over in the hierarchy menu, we can look over here in the inspector. The inspector is going to show you all of the components that are attached to your game object. So for example, my PacMan object has a transform component that's attached to it. And this transform component handles where PacMan exists in my game. Its position and the X and Y. Okay. And let's see, let's put him in there right there so he doesn't get stuck. All right. So his position in the X and Y, it also handles his rotation, which I'm rotating on the X-axis, which doesn't do anything in 2D. Let's rotate on the Z. So I can rotate my PacMan just like that. All right. And its scale, so his size. We can change his size as well. So that's what a transform does. Let's take a look at the next thing, the sprite renderer. The sprite renderer is essentially the thing that draws the art on top of this object. Without a sprite renderer, let's turn that off, my sprite goes away, meaning I have no artwork attached to this object. The object is still there. There's just no artwork there for the user to see. So I'm going to make sure my sprite renderer is on. The next thing it has is an animator, because this object has some animations to it. And so the animator is there controlling those animations. It has a circle collider 2D. If you look, this green circle around our PacMan here, that is called a collider. Now what colliders do in a game is they allow us to check whether there is an interaction between one object and another. So if I have an object that has a collider around it that tries to collide with another object that has a collider around it, let's look at our maze. See, the maze has colliders as well. If those two objects collide with each other, I can set something to happen in my script. By default, if I have two objects that have different colliders and they collide with each other, it just means that they can't pass each other's barrier, meaning these walls here are actually walls that PacMan can't go through. And if I play the game, I can show you that you can't actually go through these walls because that's what the collider is doing for me. It's keeping my PacMan from being able to go through these walls. It's kind of complicated, but you'll get the hang of it when we start programming it. All right, let's see, what else do we have? We also have something called a Rigidbody 2D. Now, the Rigidbody 2D is a component that allows PacMan to have physical movement through the game. If I want PacMan to move from one place to another, then it needs to have a Rigidbody 2D. If I want PacMan to fall if I want PacMan to grow or change. It needs to have a rigid body. If it's going to be moving in physical space, it needs a rigid body. All right. And then down here we have the PacMan move script, which is this script here. That PacMan move script is handling how PacMan moves. And I have some things here we can talk about in a minute. I think it's helpful if we open up the PacMan move script to see what's inside of it, just so you can get kind of an idea of what one of these scripts looks like. And it's opening on my other screen, so just 1 second. And almost there. It's taking a while. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to bring this over here. Now this PacMan move script is actually pretty easy. This is probably stuff that seems pretty familiar to you. This is kind of the stuff you've been looking at the whole time. What this stuff does is this is C# script that will handle this component's behavior. So I have a public variable here that sets my speed. I'm getting some inputs here from the user, and I'm outputting that into some kind of movement on the screen. And I'm also using the script to handle my animations as well. So that's what we're going to be looking at, is stuff like this. It's pretty easy. And I'm not going to get into what any of this stuff means right now, because we're going to do that in the first assignment. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and minimize Visual Studio. So let's say this PacMan script, let's go over to PacMan and let's take it off here. Let's remove this component. All right, now let's say I have this object and I wrote this new script to handle PacMan's movement, and I want this script to actually be attached to this PacMan object so that the script will work. Because right now, if I actually play the game, PacMan won't do anything. So let's see what that looks like. So PacMan doesn't move. I'm hitting the arrow keys. He doesn't move at all. Nothing happens. So I want PacMan to be able to move. And that's what this script does for me. So all I have to do to attach this PacMan script to my PacMan object, there's a couple ways I can do it. The easiest way is to grab the script, drag it up, and drop it onto my PacMan object. That's pretty simple, right? Now when I look down here, I have my PacMan move script attached to it. But let me show you the other way to do it as well. Over here in the inspector, with my PacMan object selected, I can go down to the bottom of the inspector and I can click Add Component. And it gives me a menu of all these components that I can add to my PacMan object. Down here, there's an option for scripts. I can click that and it pulls up all the scripts that I have in this game. So I'm going to click my PacMan move script, and again, it shows up. That's really it. I mean, all we're really focused on in this class is learning how to write scripts for Unity games that are basically 90% done. You guys are just going to finish the last 10% to make the games actually do something. Okay, well that's enough for me. That's about all you need to know to get into the first project. In the next video, you're going to be getting into the first project. You're going to be learning how to implement movement for a character, and we're going to be working on the same game for a couple of weeks, and turning in that game is going to be your first power standard for the course. So I'm going to cut this here, and I will see you in the next video.